Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 18. 18 of my Whispers of the Old Gods card review. I've got 10 more cards to look at from the recent dump of cards on Facebook from Blizzard. Starting off with this behemoth of a card, the Faceless Behemoth, in fact. It is a straight-up vanilla 10 mana, 10/10. Fun card, a huge giant, essentially, with a guaranteed cost. Fun and cool, but not playable. It's just too slow, too susceptible to removal. Not even probably that good in Arena, just because you have to wait forever to play it, and doesn't do all that much when you do. So a poor man's Deathwing and a bad giant, in essence. Faceless Behemoth. Pretty poor card, but I'm glad it exists just because it is the first 10 mana, 10/10, straight up like this. But moving on is actually an amazing card. In fact, maybe my favorite card I've seen so far from Whispers of the Old Gods. Not maybe the best, but my favorite for sure. Fandral Staghelm. 4 mana Druid card. The Druid Legendary, in fact, for Whispers of the Old Gods. A 3/5 in stats, which is reasonable for a 4-drop. Most 4-drops with a powerful effect are 3/5, so you feel okay about the stats. Trades efficiently into a number of different things, has solid health total. And the effect on Fandral, I think I said it wrong the first time. Fandral, I'm not sure. But the effect on Fandral is that your choose one cards. Now remember, choose one is what most Druid cards do. Instead of a battle cry, you can choose from 2 different effects. Your choose one cards have both effects combined. What? So for instance, I'll skip ahead to one card. Feral Rage, for instance, since this card is next and easily visible. Choose one, give your hero +4 attack, or gain 8 armor. If you have Fandral Staghelm on the board, when you cast Feral Rage, you get 4 attack and you gain 8 armor. So it's an 8 heal and a deal 4 damage for 3 mana, which is crazy because you don't even feel that bad about playing Fandral as a body, and you're getting just a stupid strong effect. When you start to think about other cards that can take advantage of this, Druid of the Claw, for instance, you can either make it a 4/4 that charges or a 4/6 taunt. So with Fandral on the board, it is a 4/6 taunt with charge. Again, totally crazy. With Living Roots, I'm not exactly sure how it'll work. I guess you target 2 damage somewhere, and then it also spawns you a couple Tree Ants to boot, which isn't bad for 1 mana. With Ancient of War, I guess you get a 10/10 with taunt. That's crazy. I guess with Ancient of Lore, you get a 5/5 body, but you also get a 5 health heal, and you draw a card with the newly buffed Ancient of Lore. Keeper of the Grove, I guess you silence a minion and deal 2 damage to it. The combinations are crazy. A lot of cards, potentially, that don't typically see play in Druid might get better with Fandral Staghelm. For instance, I'm trying to think of some other ones that don't typically see play. Druid of the Flame, for instance, I think will now be a 5/5 minion for 3 mana, which is super ridiculously good. Imagine getting a 5/5 and a 3/5 for 7 mana. The possibilities are endless. The card costs so little that you can get this effect out usually with multiple cards in a single turn, so it's great in the late game. It's also probably decent on turn 4 just because sometimes your opponent won't have removal and you can set up some big plays in the future, and it might be the body that you need in the mid-range. So a lot of cool stuff can be done with this card. I think the effect is super powerful, and since we don't really know where Druid is going in the future without the combo, this will definitely be a starting point for a lot of Druid decks that potentially makes them very, very good. I will say, I think this card might drop off a little in the future as Druid gets solved, if you will. But in the meantime, there's so much raw power potential with this card. It will definitely see a lot of play. Moving on, we already kind of hit this one, but Feral Rage is a new 3 mana spell. Really cool artwork. I love how this bear is being consumed by tentacles. But also a pretty neat effect. Really nice flexibility here. Usually choose one effects kind of accomplish the same thing in different ways. But this one gives you two totally different options depending on your needs, which is always nice. So you can gain +4 attack, so this is kind of a 4/1 weapon for 3 mana, which isn't super balanced compared to other weapons, but in Druid isn't too bad because it can quickly become a 5/1 weapon too with your hero power. But you can also just heal 8, which is essentially healing touch, but even better than healing touch because armor can go on top of your health, so it's very easy to get 38 armor, for instance, as a druid, just to extend your total lifespan. So good for removal, good for direct damage on the enemy's face if needed, and sometimes good just as a late game or even early game heal preparation thanks to the armor. So pretty good card, actually. I like the flexibility of this one, and it can do so many different things, and has some immediate impact too. I think this will see play. Moving on to the 2014 BlizzCon World Champion Firebat. No, Fiery Bat. Okay. Sorry for the bad humor. This is a 1-mana hunter minion. It is a beast. It's definitely a bat that's on fire. It's a 2/1, and it has a death rattle. Deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So probably not the most exciting card in the world, but I actually think it's really solid. 1-mana 2/1s are pretty good in Hunter. It lets them get onto the board early and start some pressure. It's a beast, and beast energy is always fantastic in Hunter. And the death rattle's good, so sometimes it'll ping off a little token minion that your opponent has played. It might just add up for 1 extra damage to the face that sets up lethal way down the road. And there seems to be a lot of different death rattle synergies being explored in Hunter as well, so the death rattle might even work better depending on the deck. So I really like this card. It's pretty fun and could quickly become a staple 1-drop in a kind of aggressive-oriented hunters. Moving on to a new Shaman card. So far, every Shaman card I think I've reviewed has been, at the very least, above average, and in some cases, absolutely crazy. This one, I think, is finally the first one that's probably just average, or maybe even below average. It is the Flamewreathed Faceless, 4-mana, 7/7 that has Overload 2. So in many ways, you can kind of think about this as a 6-mana 7/7, which is pretty good. It's not bad for a vanilla statted minion, you know, just no other effects, I should say. But it is a 4-mana Flamewreathed Faceless with Overload 2, which is an important distinction because, as we've seen, there are some cards that can remove Overload. A couple cards that can remove Overload now, in fact. So that might be less punishing than normal. And I kind of think of this card as almost a Fell Reaper, like a cheap mid-range minion with a really big body. And in certain decks, certainly Fell Reaper has been a powerful card. Fell Reaver, excuse me, I'm saying the name wrong. Fell Reaver. Now I'm not even sure which is right. It's very late and there's been a lot of cards. Fell Reaver. So it's been great in aggressive style decks, including some aggro shaman decks, in fact, where you just get a really big body, hope your opponent doesn't have an answer, and then push down their face with tons of damage. I think Flamewreathed Faceless will exist in a similar continuity to that, in that it's played in aggressive decks that want to hit the board really fast and just do tons of damage. That said, it's still kind of susceptible to removal. For instance, a Hex from an opposing shaman will take care of it really quickly, and you'll feel pretty bad because you wasted, total 6 mana on absolutely nothing. So it could be played in aggro decks that want to rush people. Otherwise, I think it just kind of falls into an awkward space. It's really not all that different from a card like Earth Elemental, for instance. That one has Taunt, so it's probably even better in many ways because the Taunt forces the opponent to address it. With this one, they can kind of just play around it for a turn or two while they find removal or kill it instantly. So, I don't know. Flamewreathed Faceless, average to me. I'm probably wrong, and it's going to redefine aggressive shamans and be an amazing card. So that's fine too. Moving on to another druid card. Seems like some kind of cool tree. It's called Forbidden Ancient. This is another one of the many forbidden cards that we've seen in Whispers of the Old Gods that involve spending whatever mana you have remaining, and then the card adjusting itself based on the mana you spent. So it's a 1 mana 1/1 at the base, but the battle cry, spend all your mana, gain +1/+1 in stats for each mana spent. So say you've got 5 mana left at the end of a turn. This will cost 5 mana and will be a 6/6 minion. So it's always going to pass the vanilla test. In other words, it's going to be +1/+1 bigger than its cost. So 4 mana 5/5, 3 mana 4/4, etc. Which is actually pretty good, I think. So that means on turn 3 you can get a 4/4, which is really good. It's better than a 3/4, and it trades into the opponent's 3/4 or 2/4 minion. On turn 8 you might even get a 9/9, right? I think this card's solid. It essentially gives druids ways to fill in their mana curve and get minions out onto the board. And when a class has cards like Wild Growth and Innervate, you can do some pretty cool shenanigans with cards like this. So, for instance, on turn 1, you could double Innervate Forbidden Ancient to get a 6/6 minion out onto the board on turn 1. Because you're going to gain 5/5 in stats for all the mana you spent. Actually, my math has all been off by 1 mana, hasn't it? Because it cost 1 mana to play the card, and then you spend all your mana with the battle cry. So actually, it's a 3 mana 3/3, a 4 mana 4/4, a 5 mana 5/5, etc. So it actually barely passes the vanilla test, and in fact fails in many ways. So sorry for that confusion. It's very, very late, and I've been through lots of cards so far, and there are still many to go. So actually, I guess Forbidden Ancient isn't that good. It's never going to feel that great. So you innervate this out, double innervate this out on turn 1, you're going to get a 5/5 instead of a 6/6. No, you're going to get a 4/4. No, you'll get a 5/5. You'll get a 5/5. Forgive me. We may have to edit this out. So, I don't know. It is still nice that it fills in your curve. That's pretty powerful, just because sometimes druids get stuck where they have like 5 drops on turn 4, don't have anything to play necessarily. So, it's nice in that it has that flexibility, particularly in the early game if somebody gets out to a really fast start. But the stats aren't that good, so hopefully you can just design a deck that curves out well with better overall minions. So I'm not actually sure Forbidden Ancient will be played at all, but maybe. Oh, I should also note it's an epic card, so pretty expensive for people to craft and won't impact Arena much at all. Up next is a Forbidden Ritual card that is 0 mana, which traditionally has been what most Forbidden cards are. That's why it's throwing me off, I think. So typically, whatever mana you have available is what they cost. So Forbidden Ritual, 0 mana Forbidden card from Warlocks. Spend all your mana and summon that many 1/1 tentacles. So in fact, on turn 3, you can play this and summon 3 1/1s. Turn 5, 5 1/1s. A lot of different ways to use this, and I think it's good at pretty much every turn of the game up to 5 or so. Once you hit 5, 6, 7 mana, you really don't necessarily want to fill your board completely with 1/1s because it disallows you from playing anything else. It's still easy for your opponents to remove, so committing something like 7 mana to a board that's killed by any whirlwind effect is pretty punishing. So really this probably feels best around the 2 to 4, 5 mana range, particularly when you can synergize it with cards that benefit from having multiple minions on the board, or Hobgoblin type cards, although this doesn't work with Hobgoblins, so don't try that. But overall, I think a decent card. Warlocks like to have minions. They like token style 1/1 minions in particular. These won't be imps, so they're not demons, so there won't be any demon synergies from these, but still, so many different things benefit from having lots of minions. that I think Forbidden Ritual might fit into even Zoo-style decks. It's probably objectively worse than a card like Implosion, because Implosion also has a removal aspect while summoning minions. So for 4 mana, Implosion that hits a 4 damage is insanely better than Forbidden Ritual, but that doesn't necessarily make Forbidden Ritual bad, just because it's always an option that you can fall back on and guarantees that you're going to have a good mana curve as a Zoo-style board presence deck, which is very important. Having a dead turn on like 2 or 3 as Zoo is very bad, and Forbidden Ritual will make sure that never happens. So I think this card will get played some. This is just a summoned minion, not an actual collectible card. Up next, though, is the Grotesque Dragonhawk. This is a 7-mana neutral beast, so it's kind of like the I'm blanking on the name. There's another Dragonhawk that's a 1/1 with Wind Fury, but this one is Grotesque, so it's a 5/5 with Wind Fury. But it costs 7 mana, which is definitely a very prohibitive mana cost for a neutral card like this. The Wind Fury effect is cool, of course, because it can do 10 damage in a given turn, but with only 5 health, it's just so susceptible to trades from other minions. Just a couple 2-drops could kill this quite easily. A lot of spells can remove this as well. So it's a very big investment that's very easily removed. There are potentially some shenanigans with like warrior cards like Charge, where you can play Grotesque Dragonhawk and you can charge it, and it has 7 attack and it can attack twice, making it a 10 damage 2-card, a 10 mana 2-card 14 damage combo that will sound awfully close to the Druid 9 mana 2-card combo of old. So maybe there's a world where this gets utilized as kind of a combo finisher in Warriors, but I don't think so, because Warriors already have so many great ways to combo finish, and this card is almost unplayable without the combo, whereas cards like Grommash Hellscream are still very playable, even if you don't combo them out for lethal finishers. So I think this card just fits into an awkward spot, too expensive, too susceptible, and mostly unplayable. So let's move on to a new Priest card called Hooded Acolyte. This one is a 4-mana 3/6, which is a pretty solid stat allocation actually for a 4-drop. We see a lot of 3/5s and 4/5s, but 3/6 is actually favorable in a lot of ways because it still kills most 2 and many 3-drops and survives a little better. And it also has a neat effect. Whenever a character is healed, give your Cthulhu +1/+1. So a lot of Cthulhu buff potential with cards like Circle of Healing and Acolyte of Pain, or excuse me, Wild Pyromancer. So you can Wild Pyro a spell and then Circle of Healing, 14 minions, and give your Cthulhu a crazy 14 damage buff. So I think Hooded Acolyte is definitely playable in Cthulhu Priest decks. It's got the stats, it's got the really potentially powerful Cthulhu buff. It's a nice stat lineup for Priests too, who like high health minions traditionally because they can heal them up. So control Cthulhu Priest with Hooded Acolyte seems very reasonable. I don't think the card will be played outside of that all that much, even though the stats are okay. There's just a lot better 4-drops out there that do important things, so I don't see this one being played outside of Cthulhu, but certainly could be a staple in Cthulhu decks. And that's another token card that's created by another card. And then finally our last card for this video is the 4-mana Hunter card, Infested Wolf. This is a 3/3 beast by default and has a death rattle that summons 2 1/1 spiders. So I guess this is essentially the new, more expensive Haunted Creeper. As far as how good Infested Wolf is, I presume the spiders are actually beasts. I don't know that. But unlike the spectral spiders that were ghosts from Haunted Creeper, these appear to be actual spiders and likely are beast. So that does help a little bit with the beast synergy, so you're going to be more likely to get that kill command off, for instance, or have something to buff with a Houndmaster. And that's good. And in total, this card has 5/5 in stats bundled into it, all that are beast synergies. And 5/5 for 4 is really not bad at all, particularly when it's spread across multiple bodies. It's harder for opponents to deal with. A 3/3 at the base level is a little bit of a tempo loss on turn 4, but still solid enough body to contribute. I think this card has potential. It's got some legs to do work in Hunter. I don't necessarily think it's overpowered or going to be a staple. It just could be a good value card that Death Rattle Hunters, which does seem to be a thing Blizzard is trying to accomplish, could utilize pretty well. So I would like to see Infested Wolf take off. It's a neat little card. Very basic, but hits a lot of good points. So that'll do it for me on part 18 of my Old Gods card review. If you've got some thoughts on these cards, hopefully more coherent than my thoughts, I would love to hear them. So leave a comment. I'm happy to see what you guys think as well. I appreciate your time, and until next time, game on.